No one likes mould lines, they make your models look terrible. Now let's learn how to remove them. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to remove mould lines and little imperfections that you find on your models when you've removed them from the sprue. Mould lines essentially are caused when the two halves of the mould come together and you get a little bit of material leaking through, which creates a mould line. Sometimes they're not very noticeable, but other times they can be quite extreme, and we want to remove these because they give an unnatural edge on your miniatures that don't look particularly nice. And if you're using techniques such as dry brushing, they're going to just leave you with a really obvious edge that shouldn't be there, so we want to remove them. Before we start, I'll quickly run through some of the tools that you'll need if you're going to follow along, starting with the mould line remover. Now, I typically use a hobby knife or a scalpel, and the reason behind this is it's sharper. I find it more efficient at doing the job. And if you've ever got any small parts of excess plastic from the sprue that you need to cut off, you're not having to swap between a mould line remover and some cutters. So that's why I typically use these. However, if you're prone to cutting yourself or if you're a young kid, I'd probably stick with a conventional mould line remover. It's going to remove the lines exactly the same as this. It's just that if you do need to swap between tools to make other cuts from excess plastic and whatnot, just bear that in mind. As well as this, you're going to need some sanding tools. We're going to look at a few different surfaces today, so you're going to need different sanding tools for different surfaces. Flat sanding sticks we're going to use for flat surfaces, and for the rounded surfaces you're going to want some sanding sponges, as they just follow the contours of the model. Now you know what you need, let's crack on. First up, we're going to start by removing the easiest mould lines to remove, which is a mould line on a flat surface. You want to start by getting your mould line remover and gently scrape away at the excess plastic. Typically, I like to scrape towards me as I just find it more comfortable, but you're going to do whatever works for you. You want to scrape away until all of the excess plastic is gone and the mould line remover is no longer removing anything. If you can still see it, that doesn't necessarily matter. As long as you can't feel the mould line when it's primed, it's going to disappear. After this, I just like to refine the surface of the model by using some flat sanding sticks, and the reason I use a flat sanding stick is because it's a flat edge on the model, so it follows it perfectly. I start with a medium sanding stick and then I refine it with a fine sanding stick, and this just makes sure that I've got a perfectly smooth surface so that nothing is visible when the model's primed. Not all of your models are going to have flat edges, and if they have rounded edges but a similar mould line, we're just going to treat them the same. You're going to go in with a mould line remover and you're going to scrape away all of the excess plastic until you can't feel it anymore, but you're just going to follow the rounded edges of the model rather than scraping a flat edge. When we've done this, we're going to refine it in a similar way, but this time we're going to use sanding sponges rather than sanding sticks, because sanding sponges follow the contours of the model much easier. They almost do the work for you. And again, I'm using two different grades of sanding sponge, one to sand off any excess material that's left there, and then one just to polish it up to give me a perfectly smooth surface. Sometimes some of your models are going to have attachment points that are in obvious or awkward places. When this is the case, I like to leave quite a bit of excess material on the piece of the model and then go in with a pair of precision nippers just to get a flush cut. It doesn't matter if you leave a little bit of excess material on, because we're going to go in with the scalpel afterwards, tidy it up and blend it in perfectly with the model. So now you can see we've removed the attachment point and we're left with this imperfection, which is a little bit of excess material left over from the attachment point. This is fine because we're going to work on it with the hobby knife to try and blend it in with the rest of the model. You're going to treat it similar to a mould line. You're just going to get your hobby knife and you're going to start scraping away at the imperfection, working from different angles to try and blend it in, and what you're looking to do is remove any excess plastic. When the knife stops scraping any of the plastic away, you know that you've removed it all. This particular attachment piece was on a flat surface, so I'm just going to deal with it the same way that I would a flat mould line. Once I've removed all the excess plastic, I'm going to go in there with the medium sanding stick, get any excess material off the top, and then I'm just going to polish it up with that fine sanding stick to give it a perfect surface. Next up, we're just going to tidy up this attachment point that was on a rounded surface. These are a little bit trickier because you're not just scraping a flat edge until all the plastic has disappeared. You're trying to blend this in with the contours of the model. So you're just going to scrape down, removing the excess plastic, but you're going to work from side to side around the model to try and get the best blend that you possibly can. Again, when you notice that none of the plastic is being removed anymore, you've probably removed all of it, and we're just going to tidy it up with some sanding sponges. You're just going to take your sanding sponge, you're going to press it against the model so that it starts to follow the roundness of the edge, and you're just going to go backwards and forwards, or making small circular motions if you can, starting with a heavier grit, and you're just going to move on to a fine grit to polish the edge up. Remember, with all of these methods, if it looks like you can see the imperfection or the mould line, it doesn't matter as long as you can't feel them. As soon as it's primed, all that will disappear. So there you go, mould lines, imperfections, there's nothing getting in your way now, and you can prep your model ready for your paint job. If you like this video, please let me know in the comments, hit the like button, subscribe. Again, it's absolutely free to do, and we're loving all the support we're getting on the channel at the moment. So if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. You can follow us on all our socials, you find them in the description, and for now, I'll catch you in the next one.